Alright, so a little update to the channel and the progress going on with the XJ. This is not going to stay like this. I just have this temporarily so I can protect the turbo when I run the engine. In essence, I'm going to do a loop and actually pull from the cowl. Thor is a manufacturer that makes it for the Jeeps. It comes across a 3-inch pipe and ties into the intake. But besides that, everything else is basically done. I still have not hooked up cruise control, or I think this is just a cruise control, check engine light. This is for the thermostat for the AC, which I'm not going to run. I am going to pull all this loom off so I can actually tape it up with the original XJ harness. I did incorporate the coolant ball. I've been running it for, I don't know, maybe an hour collective right now. I'm just testing things out. I did have too much coolant, so of course it burped, which is, I guess, expected. The vacuum system is done. The intercooler is done. I have cooling fans coming in to mock them up. The power steering still needs to be wired, so I will wire that up and then trigger it with a switch inside the cab. Intercooler's plumbed. I do need to tighten this up now that I see this. I have a European intake plenum coming because this does kiss a tiny bit on the hood and there's nothing I can do about it. So I'm going to change the intake plenum to the European one that's coming. It is shortened and has a little stubby bolt-on neck. One of the big things that I'm getting done is this is a Toyota A340e transmission. Of course, with the Cherokee, there is a TV cable which controls line pressure. I mounted it right there to the firewall, and it's connected to the pedal. With this transmission back here, I'm able to control everything through the CompuShift controller. So I'm going to need to dissect that, take the valve body out, the wiring over on this side, and install it here. And then when I get the new harness from CompuShift, install that, and then change the settings inside the transmission control unit. I do also still have the 1-gauge setup that I need to hook up. I need to hook up a brake switch wire, which is just kind of hanging out. Of course, put the seat back in. Other than that, she's coming along nicely. I did come to the realization that feeding the alternator through excitation through the ignition circuit is not a good idea. For people that don't know, the Volkswagen alternator will self-excite. So when you start the engine, you rev it up, it'll actually start the excitation and start producing voltage to charge the battery. This is an aftermarket one, 120 amp, and it does not do that. So after talking with Kyle, I hooked up both pins together, hooked it up to 12 volt ignition, and of course I powered it to the ignition circuit. So after I got the 12 volts, it excited, it was charging the battery, and then when I killed the engine, it was still back feeding because it is the same wire in the ignition circuit that powers the ECU. It was powering the ECU. So I ended up having to cut the wire and the engine shut down. I have what's called a Zener diode, which is a one-way check valve. Basically, kind of the same thing as these vacuum check valves that are in the system. It allows current to go in one direction, but it keeps it from flowing in the opposite. So if that doesn't work, I still have one relay. I can create and add an additional circuit and just have a standalone ignition circuit specifically for the alternator. Other than that, I said I've moved it forward and back, and it works perfectly fine. There are no error codes on the ECU. There are no error codes on the TCU. So yeah, coming along nicely.